If you watched our last episode and you realize your stress, your burnout, your exhaustion isn't just in your head, but it's coming from your stressed adrenals, you are in the right place. In today's episode, we are really going to talk about healing our adrenals, healing from stress and burnout, which is not easy, but we've got some great tips and tricks for you. So welcome to The Natural Doctors. My name's Katie Danello.
And my name is Dr. Jennifer Stagg. So what we're going to share with you today is an approach where we think about it from the perspective of if I had to start from scratch and sort of rebuild my health and really focusing on that adrenal component, where would I go? What order would I go in? So the first place that we typically start when we have such a disrupted adrenal system, which we went over in our last episode. So go back and watch that if you haven't watched it already, or at least after this episode. But this concept that has been well described called maladaptive stress syndrome, which has these 3 different phases. So by the time you get to the 3rd phase, that's what is often referred to as adrenal fatigue or burnout, exhaustion. And so at that point, a lot of people are familiar with cortisol. So at that point, cortisol is sort of bottoming out, right? So what we need to do, and this applies even, to earlier stages, is we sort of have to really start from the bottom. And the first thing that we do is to really start to restore that cortisol rhythm through restoring circadian rhythm, right? So when we think about circadian rhythm, what are the lifestyle sort of suggestions that you would recommend to patients to really get them off to a good start and get those signals going that will lead to this improved cortisol rhythm?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this conversation is just such a great reminder. And again, if you haven't watched our last episode, we're plugging it because it's so good. And when you watch that, you realize this is why vacation and time off doesn't heal our adrenals, because it is the whole circadian rhythm that we are trying to reset. It's not just oh, we're a little bit stressed here, let's take a vacation. No, it's a little bit more than that, right? Yeah. So what I am first telling, or what I'm even asking patients is, what does your evening look like? Give me an inventory of what your evening looks like after work, because there are a lot of things going on here that can contribute to a maladapted circadian rhythm. And so, for example, are we on the go with kids and, have no time to relax? So we're pretty much going from 100 to 0 trying to fall asleep. That's going to be a different picture from, I'm, on Netflix or Instagram scrolling, whatever it is, on some type of device, being exposed to all this artificial light, right? That's going to be different too. So I'm really trying to ask my patients, what does your evening look like, right? And based on that, then we kind of go into different things here. So I think artificial light is a really good place to start, because this is a problem for so many of us, myself included, a little bit, right?
And it's keeping us from healing, right? So you have to get that. Really, that's a foundational item you have to get in place. And you can take all the adrenal formulas in the world, but if you don't start with basics, you're really not going to get great results, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So this is going to require some intentionality, right? Yes. But, we say an hour at the minimum that we really want to be off screens as much as possible, right? Yeah. And if you do have to do work or be on screens for whatever reason, get some blue light blocking glasses. they're chic, they're cute now, right? They're inexpensive.
Yep.
And that can make a really big difference.
Yeah, and I had a patient this morning that we were talking about this, and she was sort of, she deals with a lot of headaches, and she is saying, oh, if she wears glasses, that could, cause headaches and some vestibular issues that she has, and she has, some complex issues. But there's also covers that you can get for your devices. So you can actually get blue light blocking sort of protectors that you could put on your laptop, you can put it on your phone, so it would actually get rid of that blue light. And some people even go a step further and they're getting red light spectrum light bulbs, right? That they're using those at night, which I think is a great idea too. But at least like get that blue light blocked out for the couple of hours before bed, I think is really important.
It is.
And then we go to the morning, right? Like that's the next place. So we say, what's happening at night? And then in the morning, are you getting early light, natural light exposure?
It matters.
Right? It does matter.
It does. And it's so interesting. I know that so many of us don't get this because in our office, we're lucky enough to have these beautiful big windows where the light comes in the morning. And so when I'm seeing patients early in the morning, I've got the shades open and almost every patient comments like, wow, it is so nice to have this natural sunlight in here. And, that's a telltale sign that we are not getting enough light exposure in the mornings. And there's nothing better. We all know that, maybe it's hard to get up for sunrise, right? But when we are, it's the best thing in the world.
Right. And so, when it's warmer, depending on where you live, if you can get outside even more so and even ground, walk around barefoot, get that light exposure first, as early as you can in the morning. But also, when it's cold, it's winter, you're not going to be stepping outside barefoot, at least here in Connecticut. I tell patients, okay, well, what side of the house is the sun coming up on and get on that side and set up near a window and get some light exposure and do, whatever your morning routine is. Try to spend some time there. 10 minutes is going to make a difference,
It makes a
right?
difference.
Now, if you can get outside and go for your walk early, that's
bonus.
Awesome. But those are, so those are the two big things we think about. Then I think we both agree on, we start looking at their sleep, right? What is happening with sleep? What time are you going to bed? Are you waking up? We need to really make sure those patients are setting up their, night for success, first of all. But if they are having some sleep disturbances, healing doesn't happen well when you're not getting restorative sleep. So sometimes we're using some like really targeted sleep supports there, but timing is something to consider, right?
Timing is important. We really want to encourage regular sleep-wake cycles. And so you try to go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every day versus, going to bed at 9 p.m. one night and then 1 a.m. the next, right? It's just, our body likes routine. It likes cycles because our hormones get released in these pulses and these cycles. And so it's really helpful. Again, you don't have to be perfect, but we want to try to be consistent. And then, with sleep, sometimes we will use great targeted herbals, sometimes some melatonin, that's totally fine, right? And so again, if you're struggling with sleep, another great opportunity to see a naturopathic doctor because we have so many great options for sleep beyond conventional harsh, sleep aids.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of other things on this topic that we think about with patients are caffeine and exercise timing, right? So that's those two more questions if you're seeing a naturopathic doctor that we often, are checking in on. So when are they having that caffeine? So if you're someone who is really dealing with adrenal fatigue, adrenal exhaustion, a lot of times some of these patients are living on coffee, right? And they're saying it doesn't even help, but they're still, really drinking a lot of caffeine. So for me, I want them to push that caffeine into they can continue to have some coffee. We reduce the total amount, but I want them having it in the morning, really. And it's more sort of a European perspective. If you go to Italy and you're ordering coffee afternoon, they're like, oh, hello, American. We don't do that here.
Yeah, exactly.
So morning time, right, for coffee. And then what about exercise timing? What do you like there?
So exercise is going to vary based on what stage of adrenal burnout or fatigue you're in, like we talked about last episode. So, for example, I really don't like when patients are working out late in the evenings, regardless of what phase they're in, because that is increasing your epinephrine, those catecholamines that we talked about last time. And that is absolutely interfering with your sleep. I don't care if you tell me that you can fall asleep right after that workout, it is still interfering with your sleep, right? So we really try to avoid the evening workouts if we can. The other time where I will kind of make adjustments for patients is if they are kind of in stage 2, where we've got this chronically elevated cortisol level and they're getting up, drinking coffee, working out fasted in the morning, I'll make some adjustments and say, can we maybe skip the caffeine, or can we hold off on it? Can we get some protein and some carbs in our system, wait a couple of hours, and then go for a workout, so that we're not hitting our cortisol with, you've already got high cortisol, you're adding caffeine, you're adding a workout where we spike your epinephrine in your cortisol. We don't want all of that happening at the same time in the morning. So I'll make adjustments there too.
While we're on the exercise topic, what do you think about types of exercise and quantity of exercise? I know this, we want our patients moving, right? So absolutely, it's not, if you have adrenal exhaustion, we're not saying get in bed for it, right? But we'll modify the types of exercise and how much exercise. So what do you kind of tend to do with patients there?
Yep, exactly. So if you're kind of in that stage 2, maybe even transitioning into stage 3, I'm not going to tell you to go do a HIIT or a high intensity interval workout. That's not what you need. You need movement, but you need gentle movement. You need yoga. You need walks, stretching, right? Maybe some Tai Chi, Qigong, right? Yeah. That's more what we're looking at for those stages. A really good example here that I think about for myself is, I remember when I was studying for the MCATs, applying to medical school, I was seeing my first naturopathic doctor, who's one of our wonderful colleagues. And she was like, I do not want you doing any HIIT. I want you doing gentle walks, be kind to your body, stretching, yoga. And when she said that, again, this was before I had any medical training.
Right, so you're freaking out inside.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
What?
Like, hold on here. But I started putting that into practice, and it felt so good on my body, truly. So remember, like, less can be more sometimes if we're dealing with adrenal fatigue.
Yeah, that's really great there. So maybe let's next talk about the role of dietary timing, dietary habits. This is probably, the next place, it's on an equal level with all the circadian rhythm stuff, right? But we're definitely going to do a dietary intake on every patient, and we're looking at when they're eating, what they're eating. So especially when it comes to adrenal fatigue, we're going to have issues with blood sugar regulation, right? Like whatever stage you're in, it's affecting your blood sugar, right? Glucocorticoids, cortisol, it comes from the adrenal glands, impacts glucose regulation. So what are we doing with patients here in terms of dietary recommendations?
Yeah, totally. So when we think about the insulin resistance glucose piece, number one, we want to take inventory of how much added sugar we're having, right? This is a big deal. So first, we want to remove the obstacles to cure, right? That is a naturopathic foundational principle. So if you're eating a lot of added sugar, which if you're in stage 2 or stage 3 of adrenal fatigue, that's common. We see that because especially in stage 3, you're so exhausted. You are looking for any crutch you can.
Little sugar rush.
Exactly. Stage 2, when we have that, afternoon lull, 2 to 3 p.m., we're going for the chocolate, right? So we really want to avoid that as much as possible. So that's the first thing, is trying to remove added sugars. The next thing I think about is, are we having well-balanced meals with protein and fiber? Carbs are important. Healthy carbs are important. But really, fiber and protein is what's going to stabilize that blood sugar. Particularly, are we getting protein with breakfast? Because so often our patients, when they're in adrenal fatigue of whatever stage, They're, often rushing out the door. They're grabbing their coffee, maybe a bagel, a piece of toast, if that, right? Or they're stopping at Starbucks for a sugary beverage of some sort. That we really want to avoid.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we're getting protein and fiber, especially at that first meal. If we can really conquer our blood sugar at that first meal, we're going to have success with that the rest of the day.
Yeah. I think about when I was an undergrad, so pre-naturopathic, and this led into reactive hypoglycemia. I was starting my day. I'd get into my first class at college, and right outside the lecture hall, there's a little coffee stand and muffins. So I'd have a giant coffee.
Yep.
I would put sugar in it, cream, and then I'd have a chocolate chip muffin, right? Like, so full sugar rush. And then, within a couple of years, and I was young, otherwise healthy, then I'm getting these blood sugar crashes because I'm stressed. And then this is how the pattern of starting the day.
Right.
And so once I figured out what this was, this reactive hypoglycemia, which would be characteristic of stage 1, go back and look at our previous episode. Then protein at breakfast is what basically, cured my reactive hypoglycemia, right? Like it stopped it in its tracks, making sure you get that protein to start off the day.
Yep, absolutely. It matters. And again, over a couple of weeks, a sugar coffee with a muffin might not seem like a big deal, but over time, like you said, it really does add up. So we want to take inventory. The next thing is, from the nutrition perspective, is these are the patients I'm really telling not to do intermittent fasting in. We love intermittent fasting in specific scenarios, but this is one of those scenarios where we don't want to see it. So don't do these long fasts into midday where you're only running on coffee. That is only going to stress those adrenals out even more.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you there. The other things we think about from the nutrition and diet perspective would be making sure our patients are getting hydrated. And a lot of times with maladaptive stress syndrome, because of the adrenal dysfunction, we're seeing abnormalities in electrolytes. And so electrolyte repletion could be really helpful here. And it could be more, elaborate electrolyte repletion that might have to be done. Work with a naturopathic doctor here. But a lot of times this could potentially mean very good salt, like a Redmond salt that you're putting in water, right? And that can really help quite a bit. And also then testing to see, do they have other micronutrients that, need to be repleted? Are they dealing with deficiencies? The adrenal glands burn through a lot of B vitamins, vitamin C, omega-3s. Like, these are all very supportive nutrients that you can, we can focus on diet and try to get a lot of it out of food sources, but this may be where we start in terms of if there were documented deficiencies and we're not getting anywhere with food sources, that there could be supplements that are recommended there, supplement formulas that are targeted that will have the nutrients in there, right?
Yeah. We really want to emphasize the nutrient piece, because when I think about adrenal glands and what they need from a nutrition perspective, that's definitely where my mind goes first, is nutrients. And we get requests all the time. People are always like, tell us what to eat on the show. We want to hear more about that. So maybe we'll do a whole episode on nutrition for adrenals.
That sounds like a great show. Okay, next I think we talk about nervous system rehabilitation, right? So when you've been through adrenal dysfunction, went through these stages, the nervous system and the adrenal glands, as we talked about last episode, are really tied together, right? So once you're at this point of having dysfunction in the adrenal system, we also need to work on rehabbing the nervous system.
Yes, exactly. So, I think for both of us, we like a lot of the same tools here. Vagus nerve therapies are really powerful here. So meditation, breath work, yoga nidra, basic yoga practices, grounding. We've done a couple episodes where we've talked about these things before. all of them have a place in really healing our nervous system, which means we want to bring more activation to the parasympathetic nervous system, or the rest and digest, and tone down the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic drive, right?
Yes.
So that's the go, 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 fight or flight, right, type thing. So really bringing in rest and digest, activating that vagus nerve, that's really going to help us heal that nervous system.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so we're definitely, always focusing on that for patients to help them better be able to, respond to those environmental triggers.
Yeah. And I think what I'll also say about here that you and I both love is energy work.
Yes.
So working with some type of energy practitioner, whether it's a shaman, Reiki, there are so many great options here in your area. You might, this might be an area where people are like, oh, I don't know about that. I've never really done energy work, but I promise just a simple Google search and you will probably find some great practitioners in your area.
Yes, because along with it, we didn't talk about that in that episode, but yes, when you have adrenal dysfunction, you're going to have disruptions in those chakras. So those, energy centers, you're going to need an energy practitioner to really assess that and help to heal and, restore function in those chakras.
Yep.
So I love that you're bringing that up.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good one.
All right. So we got to pack in a little bit more at the end of this episode. The couple of different things we want to get into before we end would be, assessing some of the other things that can happen with adrenal dysfunction, and then, herbs that we use specifically, adaptogenic herbs.
Yep.
So maybe we talk about the herbs first,
Yeah.
and then we'll use the remaining time to just touch on some of the other systems that we would need to address.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So let's dive into herbs here. So the class of herbs that we often use to start to treat adrenal fatigue are called adaptogens. Adaptogens are this really beautiful class of herbs that kind of give our adrenal glands what they need. Right? So if you are in a stage 1 where cortisol is high and you're getting spikes in cortisol, these adaptogens are going to help bring that cortisol level down. Vice versa, if you're in a stage 3 where you've got chronically low levels of cortisol, we're going to give you adaptogens that are uplifting, right? To help gently raise those cortisol levels, give you energy, things like that. So we've got different herbs based on which stage we're in.
Right.
I would say, if we're talking about some of our favorites, licorice root happens to be one of my favorite herbs.
Agreed.
And this we're using in a stage 3 patient.
Yes.
So somebody who's got low cortisol, some chronic fatigue syndrome, licorice can be very uplifting and quite powerful as well.
Yes, absolutely. And licorice, for some of you out there, might not be the right choice. So this is where, when you're starting to use adaptogens, you really should work with a knowledgeable practitioner, a trained herbalist, naturopathic doctor who's actually had training in botanical medicine. Because although adaptogens are considered a tonic, very safe category, you can get into a little bit of trouble sometimes if you don't know what you're doing. So, for example, licorice, we're using whole licorice root, and someone who has high blood pressure that's, not well controlled, licorice could bump that up a little bit more, and it might not be the best choice. And there are other choices that your provider could work with you with there. But as a class, yes, adaptogens are very, very safe medicines to use, but you really want to work with someone who knows what they're doing here, because you're going to have much better outcomes because you're selecting herbs and combinations of herbs that can be synergistic and can address specifically which which stage of adrenal dysfunction you're in, right? Yeah, just like you said for licorice, as more of a stage 3 situation. If you gave it to someone in stage 1, maybe don't need that,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah, absolutely, right? There are some things like B vitamins, which are over the counter and, pretty safe for everybody for the most part, right? But these herbs, and I would say for all herbs really, you want to work with somebody who absolutely is trained and knows what they're doing, because they are, in our previous episodes, like we've talked about, nature's medicine. Like they are medicine. This is what I tell people when I give them tinctures, which don't always taste great. Is they remember, this is medicine. It's not necessarily supposed to taste great. So really, really good point there.
Yeah.
What would you say your favorite one or two adaptogens might be?
Yeah, so definitely licorice. A couple of other ones that I really use quite a bit. Eleutherococcus I love, which is a Siberian ginseng. That works really nicely for patients that are more early stage adrenal dysfunction, so more stage 1 into stage 2.
Yep.
Ashwagandha, I think, is a really common herb. A lot of people are familiar with ashwagandha now. It has, had so many different studies. There's mountains of research on ashwagandha, and it can regulate cortisol levels. So especially when people are having those higher levels of cortisol, and, we didn't even get into, disruptions in rhythm where they could be spiking later in the day when they shouldn't be, potentially timing ashwagandha to really help regulate those spikes and reduce those spikes. So those are some nice ones. I love rhodiola. I love schisandra. Like those are some of my favorite ones there. So there's so many different options.
And what I'll also say about ashwagandha quickly here is that it's a great herb when there's also, we start to see labs showing that our thyroid is not so optimal, right? Ashwagandha kind of has that dual effect with the thyroid and the adrenal. So it's a really nice option. But so many great options, and we could talk for hours on that.
Yeah, so we're getting short on time. So, I mean, the last thing I guess we want to just give a little bit of time to is if patients then have developed some issues, whether they're digestive, affecting the GI tract, thyroid dysfunction, other endocrine issues, ovarian, testosterone levels, those sorts of things. How do you think about that? So sometimes you're going to need to actually do additional work to address those issues now that have sort of set up immune issues, all that, right?
Exactly. Because remember, these symptoms happen over time. They don't just happen overnight. And so while we're also starting to treat the adrenals, we have to also treat the immune system, the gut, our mitochondria. We touched briefly on nutrient levels. A lot of times I'll line up nutrient testing with mitochondrial dysfunction. So if we've been in, adrenal burnout for a long time, we're going to start to see deficits in our mitochondria because we're not going to be producing ATP or energy. And so I'll do a lot of specific treatments nutrient-wise to support those mitochondria. I'll do microbiome testing potentially, so I can really gauge what's happening with the bacteria in our gut. And can, we really reestablish healthy gut, treat leaky gut. That in turn is going to help our immune system. If we're having any autoimmune picture symptoms, then that will be a downstream effect of treating the gut. And so we really are we're looking at the patient as a whole, but we are focusing on each system as well, because they're all connected and they're going to be affected by this adrenal fatigue.
Yeah. That's great. Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. This was episode 2 of our adrenal series. We hope you feel empowered to go out and heal your adrenals. And remember, your body's not broken. It's just responding as it was designed to. We are the Natural Doctors. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube so you never miss an episode.